Good morning. Sorry, my kid I've got this 11-year-old who is just, wherever he sits, everything ends up just fucking a mess and like a nest. And he did that on this couch over the weekend. So I've had to like refix everything, plug everything in. So if the light sucks and that stuff, well, deal with it. Stay mad. I don't care. Anyway, so good morning, Connie. How are you? Now, this is I actually scheduled this one on Thursday for Friday, but then I decided to do a video sort of defining wokeism. But I'm going to jump sort of back and forward because it's not unrelated, right? Because I think a lot of the reason why the wheels have fallen off a lot of these sort of let me think. A lot of the reason the wheels have fallen off, right, is because I think we set some etiquette and some rules around the internet, right? But honestly, I think a lot of this stuff is just that we're figuring it out. We haven't figured out yet how to integrate sort of that digital part of us, our shadow selves, right? Or if you're a Jungian, you think, all those sorts, whatever, right? There's lots of different ways to look at it. But for me, right, I've been a crash test dummy for a lot of this sort of identity stuff, which is that when I started on the internet at, 15 years old, we were figuring out the rules. And also we thought that it was different. We thought that the internet was something that was separate. It wasn't real life, right? This is something that I'm writing about, which was that I got to be someone that I wasn't. I got to explore ideas. And now the problem is that that's still largely true, but there's a whole sort of generation. We've got 25 years of the internet now. We've got a whole generation of people who've been living under this split personality of sorts. It's almost like a dissociative state, right? Where you think that the internet is not real life, but it is real life. But everything in your body, like your hormones and all those things, they see it as real. All the stress is real. The relationships are real. The friendships. I've got friends that I've had for 25 years that I've known since we were kids that I've never met. And I think we have to have that conversation. Now, the reason why it's related to this video is because I think that this is something that warrants a conversation, which is, again, I think this is the problem of like everyone having a fucking narrow discipline, which is that they miss what's right in front of them because they're so focused on sort of one aspect of this whole thing or trying to get IP. But really what's quite obvious, what's becoming clear to me as a digital expert, again, make of that what you will, but I know other theory, right? That's the thing. I understand all of the other stuff. And maybe that's why I see it differently. But I think that, first of all, in the school of sort of community management, digital strategy, a lot of the models around building digital communities. So the paid, earned, owned model, which I won't go into in detail. I'll go into that at some other time. But digital strategy 101, which is the first thing that you would do when trying to build a community or build fans around things like the true fans principle, right? You're effectively building a cult. I've talked about this before, using the same psychology. But you'd look at what you can do in terms of like the paid stuff, so paid media buying, ads, that sort of stuff. The owned stuff, right? So you would create a community on your own website that's yours, right? And then you've got earned, right? Which is that stuff that earn, the organic side of social media. That, again, I'm skipping over the strategy because I think that's a separate thing. But I'm just giving people a very quick TLDR and, about sort of where I think this needs to go, which is that with that, I think when you see people as users rather than as people, I think it's easy to skip over the responsibility that we have. Now, obviously, a big part of my career has been questioning a lot of this stuff, right? Ethical UX design. Now, assholes clench and no one talks about it. But the fact that I've been trying to push for ethical conversations around our responsibility to our users, right? Conversations about duty of care, conversations about the kind of thing that we're building when we mess with lizard brains, that was largely ignored, also largely dismissed. Also, no one would pay me for it, for that kind of consulting. So I think it's important to call that out, which is that I've been talking about this for a long time and no one will pay for this type of consulting, which is how do we build a community, but how do we build it in a way that is ethical and responsible and looks after people and all of those sorts of things. Corporates will do that in order to sell shit. So see, the thing is, like when you do a values exercise sort of with corporate branding, you talk about your values, right? And a good brand person or a good strategist will say, will push them a little bit on that. A bad one will just go, list your values. What are you comfortable? You'll do a workshop. You'll get paid a little bit of money. You'll sit down and they'll go, here's our mission statement. And then we'll just replicate that and put that down and turn that into a digital strategy. That's what a bad digital strategist will do. But a good one, like me, who no one likes because I tell them what they don't want to hear, but I'll start to ask them questions such as, if you have to choose between a value, right? For example, inclusion or being inclusive or doing good in the world. If you have to choose between that and your KPIs, which one will you choose? And they'll choose the KPIs. And then I'll say, well, then they're not your values, right? That's why they don't like me. But I'm just saying, right? It's important, which is that, you've got your mission statement and your values, and this is all businessy shit. It's a load of shit. Let's just skip on from that. Because what I want to talk about is, as people, I think that it's linked very much to a couple of people landing in my comments, commenting on me swearing or commenting on what I've got to say, or it looking like I'm being mean to Ian or being mean to people who sort of, just for setting boundaries on my own content. Which is that I think that, first of all, we need to get away from the idea that everyone has the right to participate in every community all of the time. We need to get away from that. Second of all, we need to get away from the idea that just because you build a large audience and it becomes unmanageable, it doesn't mean that you're not responsible for the behavior or the culture that you build with that audience. Talked about this before. I've seen a few people starting to talk about that. It's actually kind of a weird coincidence because they were talking about that with Tim Pool, right? But, like you got Tim Pool, we've talked about this with the IDW. This is where the IDW becomes problematic to me, right? Which is that I think it's a bit of a cop-out when you build a tribe to then disavow that tribe when it's convenient to you. Right? Now, because if you are at all savvy in this space, and if you are at all aware or self-aware of what you're building, which I think most of these people weren't. In fairness, Brett Weinstein was thrust into this. In fairness, a lot of these people were thrust into this. They should have gotten a better advice, right? But for me, what you'll see me doing is that I'm designing my cult because I see the responsibility up front. And that's because I've got a career as building digital communities where I say, this is what I will and will not accept. These are the types of people I want in my community. These are the types of conversations that I have. I thought what I'd do is maybe walk you through what I've done, because I think a lot of people misunderstand me. I've gone through this for years. This is a big part of why I need to get this book written, because a lot of my stories show a lot of the struggles that I've been on over the years. That trying to integrate that shadow self, and I'm using shadow, I have been talking about, let's say you've got, your Myers-Briggs, right? Depending on whatever fucking framework you're talking about. I've been talking about this for years. But I had this hypothesis, like sort of 2006, that depending on, you've got your INFP. I'm actually an INFP in Myers-Briggs, if you believe in that stuff. It's a useful framework. What we do is my hypothesis is that we've all got that shadow self. So in Myers-Briggs personality theory, right? Again, it's got problems, but let's just use it, right? I'm of the view that we were embracing our shadow personality more online, because what it did was provide us with a safe space to explore our darker side or stuff that is less like us. So online, I make more extroverted, more logical, more what's the thing I say? IN, so intuitive versus like IN. What is it? IN. IS. Yeah, sensing. Sorry, that was what I was missing. I was thinking of thinking versus sensing. It's been a while. This is riffing. I hadn't really planned to go down this path, but let's just talk about this quickly. But that theory that somehow, I'm a little bit more, I'd become sort of more ESTJ online than INFP, but I'm still an INFP. I'm still and a big part of Myers-Briggs theory that people miss, it's not like a horoscope, right? But it's more about sort of, we all are a little bit introverted, a little bit extroverted. It's about that balance. The same thing, sort of intuitive sensing, thinking, perceiving. We're all different combinations of that. But we all, one is dominant, but one is also latent. And you can actually change these things over time and develop these things. So as I've matured, I've become probably more extroverted, more, all of it. Anyway, let's just move on. But I'm just saying, my theory was that you sort of explore that shadow self, right? Or we become some sort of weird mirror of ourselves, or weird shadow, and we explore that darkness. And that's why I think a lot of these fandoms and a lot of the porn community, a lot of the violence, I mean, if you remember the early internet, a lot of the early internet was sort of seeing all this fucked up shit, right? Seeing all this fucked up shit. I think that, and again, another little part of my hypotheses over the years, having observed this stuff, is that there are people that are more willing to embrace their shadow selves than others, right? And unfortunately, corporations aren't good at dealing with that. And there's a whole bunch of people that are just living in denial about who they are, right? So for me, when I say that I'm a crash test dummy, I literally mean that I've just gone through this. I've lived it. I've just had to figure out, because I went from sort of full-blown persona that was not me, that was just 24/7, like this thing, right? This monster over here that was anonymous, with this sort of slightly better, slightly more quiet, slightly more meek, more introverted, thinking, very deep thinker, all of those sorts of things. And I've had to, over time, as those collided, I've had to sort of integrate both of those parts of myself. And that's when I say that I'm a crash test dummy, I mean that. I've been doing this for 20 years, so I'm further along that journey than other people. Now, there's a lot of people that don't do that. They're just in denial. They're just living their fucking, they just live in their whole cluster of conformity and they don't think like this. I don't think like this, right? But I've been studying the neuroscience of this digital shit for years and years and years. You have to as a good UX. Anyway, that was a really fucking big tangent, but it was just something that I think when people start to say, oh, well, you've misdiagnosed this, it's like, no, I haven't. I actually am spot on. And I may not come from the academy. I may not have these things. And this is part of the problem, which is when academics look down their nose at professions, right, or professionals that are in the field rather than those that can't teach, so to speak. They miss things that are obvious, right? And I've been working as a practitioner in user experience or some variation of digital communities, user experience design, whatever the fuck you want to call it, right? Digital consulting for 20 years. I've been on the internet for 25 years, okay? I've personally lived through this stuff. I'm coming out the other side and I'm giving you sort of advice on how to do that. Now, I also was a fan. My career came out of being a fan. I also have a degree in politics. I also do policy. I also do governance, all this stuff. And now I'm doing psych. So that's going to be a nice little fucking extra bit of stuff to pour on so no one will listen to me. But I'll try my best. I'm trying to get through to people. But anyway. But I think when people see me say, fuck off, Ian, when you see the pylon or you see me roast Oscar or you see something like a confusing interaction with Kat, right? If you're watching this, Kat, this is something I just want to use as a case study, right? Because what I'm doing, and you may not notice it because this is something that I haven't really explained. This is the application of something that I am it's the application of something that I know to be true, which is that you've got to build a tribe and really think about the culture that you're building, right? And this is true for a business leader. It's true for a community leader. It's true for anybody. If you're building your family, right? We all have ideas for what kind of thing we want to build. And for me, right, I want to build a community that is inclusive, but with firm boundaries around conversation, right? Also, it's just basic community management stuff, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you would do if you were building an online community. So it might give you a bit more sense of what I'm doing, because basically, like, I firmly believe that people like the IDW, right? All of these people with millions of followers, right? They might have good intentions, but this is part of the blind spot with academics, is that they think they fucking know it all. Jesus Christ, would someone just get someone to have a consult with me? I offer them consults. They ignore me because they think they know it better because they're on the internet and they think they know everything, right? They don't. Because I believe that a big part of the problem with a lot of this culture war stuff is that nobody is actually thinking about the tribes they're building, right? Seth Godin's pretty good at talking about this stuff. But even then, I think that when it comes to, like I said, in a workshop, right, with corporations, when it comes to you making a decision between the bottom line and the culture that you're building, or the tribe, that you will choose money. And I don't believe that. I don't think that that's right. Right? I really don't believe that is. I think this is how we end up here. Is that people were making, again, it's that business model that I was talking about, that we can't make difficult choices. Now, I'm someone who's, as much as it frustrates me, right, and creates a lot of instability, like financially for me, I will not just take anyone's money, right? If I was going to do that, I would just go and consult and just, do bullshit agency work on brands and like all that sort of bullshit, right? But I have constantly brushing up against ethics, constantly seeing what the consequences are, right? And one day I might do a video on user experience and that sort of the way that I've butt heads with clients over the years when it comes to ethics, right? Like a food company who they're like, I think what we need to do is get away from what is technically legal or what makes us liable versus what we are responsible for. And this is a good example, right? So one company that I was working for, food distributor, I was just sort of, we're doing an e-commerce solution for them, right? And we butt heads with them because they sell a brand of product. right? It's a big brand, and basically 8 of the 9 products are gluten-free, right? And 7 of the 9 products nut-free. And they were okay, and they were basically like, this was what the conversation that I had. And this is the difference between something where you're technically responsible, right? I think if you're asking a lawyer if you're liable, I think it's the wrong way to think about things. And this comes back to community building, and I'll talk about this. Technically, are you liable? No. Are you responsible? Do you have a responsibility? Yes. So in this situation, 8 of the 9 milks were gluten-free, right? I think 7 of the 9 products were nut-free. And they said, well, this was an argument we had. They went, well, we want a filter that says gluten-free, nut-free, and it just shows those things. And I said, right, now, if you need to, some of these things need to pass the ordinary person test. So in the case of the milk or the gluten, when you're dealing with food allergies particularly, right, that can be deadly. If that person, your ordinary person, browses that website, right, and checks gluten-free, 8 of the 9 products come up. They're in their mind, that's going to imprint something. It's going to imprint that brand is gluten-free, because they're not going to count. They're not going to see 8 of them. They're not going to see that one that's missing generally. That's where the user experience and what we know about brains to be true. They're not going to process it that way. Therefore, do you have a liability, right, for that one person who assumes that whole brand is gluten-free or nut-free or whatever, buys the one product that disappeared, right, and their child gets sick? Yeah. I would argue, yeah, you have a responsibility, because that doesn't pass the ordinary person test, and that exists in law. But anyway, I'm just using that as an example, because in a community, right, there's a difference between, like, technically is Tim Pool or Brett Weinstein or all these people, or Donald Trump, right? Are they liable for their community? Actually, Trump's a good example. Is he technically liable for his community and the behavior of his followers? No. Is he stoking the flames and encouraging the worst behaviors? Yes. And that's where I think it's like, well, we need to get away from these, those fuckwits that crash the stream, Ians and shit, right? Where they're like, well, this is public, I have the right to do what I want. And it's like, well, no, you don't. Because I'm trying to build a community here, right? And I have a very clear idea of what that community is going to be. Also, I have a sense of responsibility about that, because I don't want people who are associated with my name going out into the world and be fuckwits to other people. Okay, and that's why I just tell them fuck off. Okay, so there's a lot behind this stuff. There's a lot of stuff behind why I do the things that I do. Also, I swear on purpose. I don't sit in business meetings swearing like a sailor. First of all, this is just my channel where I riff, so I don't censor, right? Second of all, I have a stutter, and I replace swearing with my stutter. I just have to work harder in a business situation or a polite situation to not do that. But I do have a slight form of stuttering, okay? There's that. There's also the idea that when you swear and when you use certain words, I've got a whole chapter on the word cunt, okay? Now, I have been asked about why I say that word, and I said, because it pisses the right people off, right? Because it pisses off the people that are easily offended, okay? It pisses off people who think that they can dictate what I say. There's a whole bunch of stuff underneath telling someone to fuck off and behind swearing, is what I'm saying. Also, asserting yourself. Now, this is where I assert myself, because I need to be seen to be the leader and in charge of this cult that I'm building, right? Which is, and I say cult because that's what we're building, right? But as the leader, I need to be seen to be setting boundaries and assert myself in charge. I'm the pack leader, right? So if someone comes in and starts sort of dominating, right, or steamrolling me, right, I will push back. Right? Oh, Sarane's here. Hello. right? Is my point that you see what I'm saying, right? There's a whole body of thought underneath all of what I do. And I'm trying to be a case study in that, right? Because this is part of the thing that I think that has happened with wokeism in particular, is that they've created a culture with no real sense of what they've built, right? Across the board, magas, cults, wokes, whatever tribe you build, right? IDW, whatever fucking tribe you build, they haven't really said, no, I don't accept this behavior from my community. I do, right? So that's the thing where, so if I set up and set a firm boundary, it's usually because somebody has undermined me, right? Or is trying to steamroll or dominate my chats or, all of that sort of stuff, right? Isn't respecting the boundaries. So if I see boundaries not being respected, I will sort of go in and just assert that boundary on behalf of everyone else. If someone crashes the stream, I will say, you're not welcome. We don't want disruptive people, right? So again, and this is something where I think when you're a pro, it's automatic. It's easy for me to triage, right? So like doctors, when I had pancreatitis, and that time when I like nearly died 2 years ago, and the surgeon in the emergency room was fascinating to me because I had to go to 3 different hospitals to get seen. So what I did was I went to the public emergency room. They turned me away, said, "Oh, come back. You got turned me away." I went to another, because I was really sick. Went to another public one. I said, "No, I'm sick," right? And I was sent home. Took 3 days to get, and then I went to the private emergency room, which we should have done in the first place anyway, right? But this doctor turned around and went, "Oh yeah, that's obvious. You've got stones that blocking, and you've got pancreatitis. We're gonna have to get that out immediately. You got 24 hours, blah blah blah." By that time, I was like jaundiced and stuff, right? But because he sees it a lot, right? It's that availability bias that we've got, right? But he sees it more because public hospitals ignore gallbladders. They send you home. So more of them end up in the private hospital, right? He sees it more often. He sees it. He goes, "Oh, yeah," but he's seen it over 20 years. He goes, "Oh, yeah, I see that. I know what that looks like." That's very similar to how I triage these sorts of situations, which is I've seen it all repeatedly and I know how it ends. So I kind of just pull those levers, and again, and there's a chance that he could have got that wrong. Like it could have been my liver, it could have been something else. But again, that's where experience and wisdom and having seen it all before and all of that stuff comes in. So there's a lot behind that fuck off, Ian, right? There's a lot behind it. Right? It's not just arbitrary being a cunt. It's not just arbitrary swearing. It's all very strategic, right? And that's why, again, a lot of this is an experiment, but there's a lot of IP behind it. But also, I firmly believe that we've built the wrong things. We've built the wrong culture. And so for me, right, I firmly believe that a lot of this setting norms, setting boundaries, but creating cults with people that are ill-equipped to lead, right? Influencers aren't bright people. They're not bright. And also a lot of the advice that we've again, a lot of influencers, I'm talking about the influencer culture around models and celebrities. Again, I work with celebrities on this stuff. They won't listen. They don't listen. Some do. Some are smart and take it seriously and try to foster a certain encourage certain, put positive and negative reinforcements in place to make sure that their community runs smoothly. But most don't. Most just want the money and the hits and the clicks and the fame, and they don't really think about the consequences. Right? It's like with comedians. If you're at a comedy show and there's like sort of pool of fuckwits that are heckling and making the whole thing unpleasant for everybody else, right? There's people who encourage that in their audience, and there's people who just go, "Nope, security, get them out because it's making 99% like uncomfortable." That's the kind of thing. Same thing. So for me, right, and also in community management online, right, here's some advice. If you don't set your culture up front, someone else will, right? So if you put yourself at the mercy of that community, someone else will come in and start dictating that culture for you, right? So this is me, again, taking charge, right? You want to make people feel like they want to come back or not come back, depending on their behavior, right? You want to create a thing where people sort of, because people tend, you guys don't sit around here for an hour a day for no reason. You want something, right? You want me to model something for you, or you're sick of the culture wars. You're fed up. You want something else. You just want to be able to relax, right? You're sick of fucking leaning in and you just want to breathe out, right? I don't lean in, I breathe out. I want to just fucking breathe out, right? And I just want to create a chill space where, like, we're brave, we speak, we are defiant against the fucking woke scolds and the MAGAs and all those people, and we stand in defiance. But I want you to take that outwards and model that elsewhere, right? And go, and learn from this and go, okay, if you go into other communities, you start to see how you can have an influence and impact on others. Or if you're building your own community, set boundaries and make sure that you're making everyone feel part of it, right? Hi, Lisa. So engaging, right? And that's one thing that I do have trouble with, and it's mostly because of my muscle memory. Sorry, not my muscle memory, my workload, right? Which is that is engaging, right, with new people and patrons and making people feel special. But I try very hard to make people feel special, right? But you've got to earn that, because otherwise you can't be all things to all people, especially online, especially on a live stream, especially on Twitter, and also, right, my politics is largely informed by the reason why I'm a member of the Labor Party more than any other party is because it's the only party whose extremes I can defend, right? It's why I would never become a member of the Liberal Party, because I would never be able to defend the far right Christian people in that party. Same with the Greens. I wouldn't be able to defend, and that's the problem with the Labor Party, is that I can largely defend most of the people in there, even if I don't agree with them. That's changing, right? That's absolutely changing. But again, I'm in Western Australia where it's slightly different, right? I need to, and it's the same thing with the gender critical thing. I've been saying more and more about the behavior of certain gender critical people and whether it's productive, right? And whether, there's a lot of sort of complicated stuff there, but I'm not afraid to just call out bad behavior, right? Because I don't want that kind of space, and I don't want the money of people who expect me to behave that way. Because there's a lot of bully communities out there. There's a lot of bully communities out there, and I don't want one. I want one that's like, it's not even creating a batshit woke, fully inclusive, nothing, asshole clench fucking thing either, because that's a different form of bullying community. It's a different form. I want one where we can just relax, have a game, have a joke, have a laugh, learn some shit, fucking relax. And we're all fed up and we just relax, okay? And so, but people do, you unconsciously adopt the attitudes of those that you're around. And I am consciously aware of that, right? And I want people who are not interested in sort of that to self-select out. And that's why I put all these little landmines around there, like with the swearing and, not being afraid to stand up to the bad behavior on all sides, right? Not be afraid to, that people who want me to be like all out culture wars funny all the time, or people who want me to be all out academic all the time. The answer is that I'm both of those things. I've integrated my silly side with I've integrated most of that. They're often in conflict, but at the same time, I think that that's where doing the work helps. And I think maybe that's where people can come to me and see us work through this and figure this out for themselves and maybe build their own communities out of it, right? Like, I want a culture of respect. And when I say respect, that's an open-ended word. My definition of respect, which is boundaries, and respecting my boundaries, respecting my community, all of that sort of stuff, right? Not respect as in the gaslighting kind of respect where I don't tell Ian to fuck off. So if Ian walks in, Ian can fuck off because he's not showing respect to the other people or to me, right? And also, I'm not in a democracy, and you've got, that's the thing, as a community leader, right? Even if it's a small one, this could well become a big one. And you got to set those seeds and plant those rules very early on in your community, because if it does get bigger, it gets harder to manage and gets out of control. So one of the reasons why you should set this stuff very early is because the community needs to become self-policing at a certain point when it scales, because it becomes unmanageable. Right? So as time goes on, it will be harder and harder to manage chats. It will be harder and harder to manage my Twitter account. It will be harder and harder to manage these things, right? If it grows, I mean, I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying if it does. That at some point, I'm going to rely on other people to like tell people to fuck off, Ian, and pull their heads in and know that I'm going to back them. And I've been through this with a couple of people that, in communities that I'm in, where the leader, the cult leader, has to be willing to back people that are just defending the community and trust their judgment and let the community sort itself out. And that works, right? So that's where when you get someone like a sort of an SJW trying to take over and cancel and fucking poison a community, you need to get rid of them and trust and empower your audience, right? Your people, to turn around and do that on your behalf, and you back them, right? I've talked about this before, right? But I just want to create this chill space. Now, this is why I don't want bad behavior. I don't want real transphobia, right? I don't want that. I don't want misgendering. I don't want all of that stuff. I don't think it's nice. I don't like it, because it's not how I would conduct myself. And we can disagree on that. We can disagree on it, and I think that that's okay, but I just don't think it's okay to disagree without just being militant. I don't like extremists regardless, and I'm not saying that gender critical is necessarily extreme. I think that the horse is bolted on the argument, and there's a point where the argument becomes unproductive. And I think that having gender critical beliefs is great and fine, and you have that freedom. What we need to do is work in law to protect our rights to have different beliefs. But actually just abusing people for that belief, I don't think is productive, because people believe it, right? That's the thing. And that's where it's just, I don't know, just there comes a point where an ideology gets so much traction that it becomes unproductive. And yes, we need to critique the power that is backing this belief without realizing what it actually is. That's a different conversation. But there's a point where I don't want that kind of behavior, right? My voice just activated am I flagged by Google, am I? That wouldn't surprise me. Okay, Google. Hey, Siri, open Judith snuff porn. Oh, my phone went off. Okay, don't do that. No, but I think that's, when I talk about this sort of responsibility, right, I think it's important to be clear that you can this is the real definition of sort of, this is where we've unwittingly built these communities around dummies, for dummies, with no self-control and no social skills. And I think that a lot of that is really just, we need to just go, no, that's not acceptable in our community. It's not that kind of behavior. There's ways to do things. There's ways to conduct yourself, right? And there's just ways to interact with people. It's called manners. And I talked about this the other day. And that's where that new, I don't want to use the word social contract, because that's got its own specific meaning, but that's sort of, those norms, building norms around this stuff. I think that's where we need to be, is we need to start building. It's like, well, yeah, technically you're right. Technically they're a man. Technically they're this, and technically you're allowed to do that. But is that really like cool? Right? Let him believe he's a woman. That's fine. Let it go. The law needs to be changed so that he can't, so that's not affirmed, or it's clarified. right? This is my frustration, is that people are so in the weeds with this stuff that they're kind of distracted from the bigger picture. It's like with, in Victoria, there's a conversion bill going at the moment, right? Which has problems. But at the same time, a lot of people are just like, well, what we need to do is flood all of the politicians with angry letters. And I go, well, is that going to work? Or is it just going to make us look crazy and extreme? Wouldn't it be better if you actually address the problem and focus on the solution, which is the fact that it's not most, I think most people agree that going in, I mean, any clinician who would say you're not trans and let's talk you out of that, I don't think any clinician would do that. But there's room for that, like with gay conversion therapy. There's people that would actually deny that and cause harm as well. We need to acknowledge that, right? But most clinicians would probably inquire, and there's a gap in the law because of crazy people, right? I think we've got to be pragmatic and think about the day-to-day, right? Which is that most clinicians would probably gently do this, and a crazy person, right, can accuse them of whatever they like. The law needs to be clear so that if that crazy tries their luck, that there's a process in place, and you can't just put the legislation in place and then bump it to the courts and then force some poor psychologist to be defending themselves for the fucking 5 years because the politicians were too lazy to think it through. That's the real problem. Mobbing people with they're a man though, and the trans are coming, I don't think that's productive, and it doesn't work, right? And that's where it's like we need to get to what's the actual fucking problem and what is the actual solution here? Like with wokeism, you can engage in this fucking, oh, look what they did today until the day cows come home. They're funny as fuck. There's material in it, yes, but there's a point where the material becomes kind of hacky as well. And you need something more. You need to be doing something. You need to actually be sort of doing something a bit more, bit deeper than that. And I've been caught a few times. I think this was the transgender prison thing and the Lash League thing. It's like, well, there's the reaction and then there's what's actually happening underneath and the structures and why they're doing that. And that's the bit where I have been caught up a few times. Like there was the Canadian women's clinic, the cervical screening thing, right? Which is, actually, let me bring it up. Hang on, because this is a really good example, right? Hang on, right? There's a thing that did the rounds, right? Where this is a really good example of where fucking you look crazy like gender criticals, right? Because let's look at hang on, let me just quickly share my screen, right? Which was, right, this. Everyone lost their minds over this, right? They screenshotted this as get tested for like cervical screening, right? That's funny. But at the same time, they're not putting the trans woman there as a woman in the cervical clinic. I would imagine that what happened here is that there's a lot of people who don't know what a cervix is. And they're asking the service for services. A lot of people, whether you agree with them or not, they still need services. And I think that what's happened is probably they're seeing their Google results that people are searching for trans women cervical screening, and they're going, actually, guess what, guys? You don't need it because you don't have a cervix. It's a clarification. Like, look, see, if you're a trans woman and not had bottom surgery, you aren't at risk for cervical cancer. However, if you're a trans woman who has had bottom surgery to create a vagina and possibly a cervix, there's a very small risk that you can develop cancer in the tissues. See? And this is where everyone's like, we're erasing women. No, they're not. You're flipping out because trans women get a page on a website. And this is where I think I've been caught, and I'm realizing, and I'm not, it's so frustrating. Like I was talking about, the behavior, being aligned with a tribe, right? who are making you look dumb and making you look stupid and making you look like you're fucking overreacting, and you're actually just trying to understand what's happening and trying to work through it, and confused. And this is where, I've talked about, and this is why I know that I won't have a huge conversation. A huge audience. It's frustrating me because there's only money in the wars. And it's fucking frustrating because it's like, can't we just not act like fuckwits? Right? It's just, yeah. And this is where, well, technically, like, what? You don't want, this was the thing that frustrated me because I didn't, again, I have, people don't realize I don't see a lot of stuff on my Twitter account or my Facebook. I use them as channels and I schedule a lot of stuff. There's times when I'm procrastinating and stuff that I'm on there, or at nighttime. But during the day and during the work, I've got a few things scheduled during the day and I'm busy. I work 12 hours a day and I'll see this stuff and I'll quickly watch a video and I will take it on face value sometimes and go, oh, fuck me. Fuck me, this is happening. And I've been trapped now 3 times. The last 3 times that I've reacted to this trans stuff or they've actually been things that I agree with. They've been laws I agree with and positions I agree with. And this is why I'm with this conversion bill in Victoria, conversion therapy bill. It's like, hang on, I'm going to read that shit first and get the facts because people are just repeating shit and focused on what might happen, right? Yes, there is a potential for that. And that clarity needs to be there. The thing is that politicians are passing legislation and not engaging with the complexity and bumping it to the courts and letting the courts sort this out. And that's not cool. But at the same time, it's like I sat there and I was like, what do we do? What do you want to do? I've said this in the transgender prison. We're kicking trans women into the sun so that we can just fucking, that's not a solution. So we have to make sure that the legislation has mechanisms in place so that crazy people who think that Kira saying good access to mental health services before transitioning and affirmative care comes in, right? And that's not what affirmative care model is not. It's like, this is this problem. It's just like, I'm studying to be a clinical psychologist now. I've worked in child protection. I know what affirmative care, the intention behind it is. And I think that when we're henny pennying all this stuff, this is how it's like, it's no different to like the trans activists screeching about like bunk suicide and mermaids threatening suicide because they don't get what they want. It's the exact same behavior. It's the behavior that I have a problem with, right? So Cyrene said there are no bottom surgery specialists. You can just go and see to check for those issues. So you can go to the people who can, and there probably never will be. And they'd go out of business, not enough patients. And that is exactly. And see, this is the thing. This is my frustration, right? I don't believe necessarily that gender identity is a thing. And if it is a thing, but I do believe that gender dysphoria is real. And if you understand psychology and the role of is that there's it's psychosocial, there's a society feeds mental illness. It's a combination of things. Okay. If you fit in the camp of being sort of a materialist, right? And you believe that there's no mental disorders are not medical disorders and there's all these fucking schools of thought on things. Right? It's messy and complicated. So there's a bunch of people for whom gender dysphoria is very real, regardless of the cause, and for whom transition works. Those people need services. And like Cyrene pointed out just now, is that there's not going to be anyone, well, especially right now, who's gone through sort of, 15 years that it takes to be a surgeon, right, who can do screening, right? It's just a practical thing. And this is my frustration with this stuff. And it's like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do, Twitter? What are we doing? Right? I don't know. It's just so fucking frustrating. Right? Anyway, sorry. I was going to start talking about the Democrats and also why, the cynical exploitation of people's vulnerabilities with wokeism, right? This is why when I say all of this stuff lays firmly at the feet of those who should know better, right? I've diagnosed this ages ago, which is when I said, where are all the adults? The cynical exploitation of people's vulnerabilities in the fandoms, people's vulnerable psychology, people's tribalism, people's base thing. I know that the Democratic digital team understand what I'm talking about. And they've created this and they're cynically exploiting it. Right? Elizabeth Warren cynically exploiting a trans child. She knows the issues and she chose to do that. Right? That's where your criticism needs to lie. Trump deliberately stoking the flames of this, the culture wars. Right? And that's why with the IDW and those people, I feel like I'm not on board with them ethically. That's why it doesn't sit right with me. And there is an argument there, which is that you're taking money from people who you shouldn't be encouraging that behavior. You should be encouraging people to get the facts or not devolve into fucking tribalism, not go and attack some poor TikTok kid because she's doing a dance about a thing that she thinks is true, right? At the end of the day, I've said this before, you're a fucking middle-aged man punching a 22-year-old girl, right? With this is my frustration with Gad Sad and those people with AOC. Aren't you a big fucking hero making fun of a young woman? The optics of that. You're a 50-something-year-old man mocking a 20. Aren't you a hero? The people, it's yes, this is where identity does matter, right? And the optics of it matter. And yes, AOC is a member of Congress and there's a different thing, right? There's no fair game. There is an aspect of fair game there. She's responsible for her audience and their behavior, right? She is cynically exploiting them. And that's a different conversation. But these middle-aged men that think dunking on AOC is fucking and they're clearly getting off on it. It's aren't you you're a big man, aren't you? You're a winner. You're a giant fucking winner. That's what I'm talking about. And it's can't we try to be, and again, it's tempting. I'm a smart ass. I'm funny. Fuck off, Ian. All that stuff. It's funny. Right? And there's room for that. But if that's the dominant culture, if you're there's room in every community to have a bit of fucking fun and a pressure valve and say what you want and riff and talk shit and have a joke, right? Or for jokes to fail, right? I'm still not sure whether I should keep the Little Red Riding Hood thing up. It was funny. In retrospect, feels a bit fucking mean. I think I'm going to get rid of it. There's things where I go, oh, I don't know if that's really it's not cool, right? But there's room for a joke. But when that is the dominant culture of your community, I think this is where the responsibility has to kick in and you need to go, well, is this the best? Are you creating a shit posting community? If you want to create a shit posting community, go for it, right? There's shit posting's fun, right? There's plenty of them. They're great, right? And it's funny. Right? All great memes come out of shit posting. But is that if you're dealing with your personal brand and what people think of when they think of you, right? When they think of me, I imagine a lot of people say, she fucking irritates the fuck out of me. She frustrates the hell out of me, but she's really smart. Right? That's something that I know because I like to create that sort of that brand, that conflicting personal brand, because it's interesting and I'm exploring that because I'm exploring those two sides of myself, and that if that reflects in my brand, right? And I always think ahead in case this thing does explode and does get big or something happens, right? Where I have a community, I want it to be good from the get-go and make it scalable. I don't want it to just be a fucking shit posting. What happened today? There's plenty of fucking places where that can happen. And again, there's room for that. Shit's funny, but it's just, yeah. Anyway, I just feel like, you know, we have more of a responsibility now, you know, and that's why with Brett Weinstein and you know, Dave Rubin and all of those people, they go, oh, I'm on the, not Dave Rubin necessarily, because he's gone full fucking right wing, but you know, those people that go, I'm on the left, look at my political spectrum test. No, the political spectrum test is not the only fucking thing, because that's just how you perceive yourself and your own self-perception. That's like that values exercise that I was talking about. What happens when your politics comes in conflict with your material, with money or with clout or love or those sorts of things? You can be theoretically, I see a lot of theoretically feminist men out there. I see a lot of theoretically woke men out there who behave like conservative Christians when it's actually like matters, right? When it actually matters, they hate women, right? When it actually matters, when there's money in front of you, I think these self-tests, self-reports are somewhat immaterial, because this is why I say behavior is more important, and what a behavior you allow in your name, or the optics of what you allow, right? And this is something that, the political, like, oh, look at me, I'm a left libertarian, but I will like cancel TERFs. No, your behavior is what determines your politics. And this is with the IDW. I think that's where there is a valid argument for it being a sort of stepping stone to the far right, right? Because they do turn a blind eye to certain behaviors that certain community members, right, will encourage, such as going on Gab, going on these things, you know, thinking that you can say whatever the fuck you want to whoever the fuck you want with no consequences, right? Boundary busting of other people, right? It's the behavior of the communities that are similar. It's not necessarily the politics of the person. It's what they allow to happen on their watch, right? And this is where there's things that I allow to happen on my watch that I don't necessarily, well, most of it I don't see, right? A lot of it is because I just don't keep up. I try to call stuff out as much as I can. And I'm only one person, but what I can do is build a community that does better, right? That sort of calls out that behavior on my behalf. And it's not about kindness. It's just about respect and boundaries. And this is my criticism of, like, you know, Gad's sad as well. And he really incites mobs. First of all, he's wrong about radical feminism. Second of all, he loves his mobbing. He's built a tribe that is ugly, right? And that's something that, like, someone suggested that he would want to talk to me and stuff. And I was like, no, he would berate me and humiliate me in front of his bros. That's I just know that that's how it would go. And he seems reasonable. Yes, he does. But I don't want to bring his audience. His audience behave abhorrently, right? Anyone who thinks, and that's the thing. I'd rather grow my audience with people who are like-minded, because I'm not growing an audience, I'm growing a community. They're different things, right? It's like the difference between building a network and building a community. A community actually has like-minded people and like-minded and values and behaviors and norms and all of those sorts of things. And I think that that's really where a lot of this culture war stuff has gone wrong, which is that the grown-ass adults haven't stepped up and set boundaries, because they're more incentivized by money and clout, right, than they are by living their values. And I don't give a fuck if you've got a political compass that says, I believe X, Y, Z. Your beliefs are irrelevant. Your behavior is what actually, like, determines largely. I mean, yes, you can have good intentions and unintended consequences for behavior, different things. I'm not a consequentialist. I'm saying that when faced with a choice between money and fame and your values, if you don't choose your values, it's not a value. You don't have it. It's a theory. That's why Louis C.K.'s bit, I believe the things you believe and the things you do. The belief is good. You hold on to the belief. But when your values only matter as they're not principles if you don't keep them, right? And that's, so what Mr. Tallum said, I really want to go back to not caring about politics much, but kind of forced to speak up over the last few years. Well, yeah, but I think that there's a good way you can avoid politics easily by just focusing on people's behavior, right? Which is, I'm of the view that it doesn't matter what your politics are. If you behave like an asshole, you're an asshole, and you can address I would actually address the actual behaviors rather than the beliefs, because people are going to believe what they believe, right? And I think that getting into debates are pointless, largely pointless. That's why when people go debate me or debate that Gad said, I went, no, because I know he's going to humiliate me. Because he's going to find a way, because the way he conducts himself and approaches those things is in an adversarial way. It's not in a way, like I said in my last stream, about there's people who build on ideas and there's people who are just about the tear down. And I think that he's one of those people that just tears down. Now, I say people are stupid because people are being stupid, but that's calling out behavior, right? Because people believe stupid things. But it's behavior that I don't like. It's certain conduct. And I think people this is the same thing with Christians. You could be a fucking Christian and a terrible person. It's the same people who go to church on Sundays only to gossip and destroy people. It's no different, right? It's the same thing with religion. Your belief doesn't mean shit, right? If you don't actually practice these things. And I think it's more that politics is a practice more than anything else. It's what you do and how you conduct yourself, right? That's my view. But again, that's why I think when you're talking about online behaviors, right, you need to really take it seriously, the responsibility that you have for who you let into your community and your tribe, right? And that's why you'll see I'll engage with people who show up frequently and are nice and respectful and stuff. But then if someone is sort of dominant, steamrolling, like crashing a boundary, I'll start to set boundaries. And if they don't respect the boundary, I'll fucking do that, right? It's the triage. And it's hard to do when you're live streaming because you got like so many moving parts, and I'm going to get it wrong, but that's the kind of thing that I like to build. But I like to get people thinking about this. I know what I want to do with the channel, right? I didn't expect it to sort of grow. I just expected it to just be me talking shit, getting used to being on camera, talking about sort of digital politics. But, I think my UVP really has become this thing where it's like we're figuring this all out. I think I've got the answers, but it's just a place where we can all just breathe out and relax and have some fun and talk shit and figure out the world, right? Without sort of outside interference or like going crazy or whatever. And if people aren't in on that, then if people are sort of sitting here trying to dominate the conversation or get me to be their mouthpiece, then that was not what I wanted to do in the first place. This was the idea of this thing was so that I could express myself, right? So people could see more of me, because a lot of my writing can become across as quite aggressive, and I'm just increasingly getting less and less time to fucking write. So this was just a way for people to see me thinking things through, right? And if you come along, come along. We're building a nice little thing here, right? But I think we just need to conduct ourselves better. Okay, don't become the people that you're like criticizing. I think that we just have, I'm living my principles: freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of thought. I should be allowed to talk about these things, choose who I hang out with, and others can go hang out wherever the fuck they want. But, and also just setting healthy boundaries around this stuff, and just maybe showing by example, modeling the behavior for other people who want to build a tribe, how to do it from the beginning. Right. And I think the problem is that because I kind of got thrust into this culture wars stuff, I attracted a bunch of sort of people that, aren't necessarily interested in that part of things. But I'm going to try and do better. But there's a few things I might want to remove. I don't know. I feel like I need to show the journey, but I just worry that it's just going to come back to haunt me at some point. I know it. But yeah, I'm going to get rid of the Little Red Riding Hood video, I think. It was meant to be funny, but I don't know if it really landed. So Oh, so Judith said she listens because I make her think. Yeah, well, that's all I can hope for. It's all I can hope for. I'm going to go. Thank you for your, and I'll say it. Hang on. If you want to support me, go to my website. I'm really proud of this joke that a clownfish is a red herring that identifies as an argument. I'm so proud of that joke. You have no idea. I'm trying to decide whether there should be merch or not, but I think it should be because it's funny. But I've got to do a watercolor of a clownfish on my iPad. I never get time to do shit. I'll do what I can do. But thank you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. I'll talk more about the fandom stuff as we go and where I think we've gone wrong. And I think I'm just sick of the culture wars. I think there's a point where it just becomes unproductive and reacting, and we've just got to work towards solutions and loving each other, right? I don't think that you can claim to be on the left or what I think is truly left, one of compassion and kindness, inclusion, all the good parts. And same thing on the right. If you're a Christian or you have a different idea or, value things that your behavior, if your behavior is not in line with your beliefs, then I think that that's where things need to shift, right? Also, feel free to quote me on memes. I love that shit. I love it when people quote me. I've been getting a few people doing that lately. And it's funny. It's like, don't lean in, breathe out. I was like, that's a good one. I like that one. I said that today, actually. But I was like, oh, I need to get quoted more. Anyway, whatever. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. I will see you maybe tomorrow. I don't know. Probably tomorrow. Bye. Also, I'm not sick of the cat yet. Can you tell? Bye.